Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. I was recently contacted by a subscriber of my channel who said they liked my content, and we ended up playing a game of the Vienna Game main line, which I'll talk about as the game 2 in today's video. But a few days later, they sent through an absolutely stunning game of the Vienna Gambit Accepted, which had double brilliancies as well. And this was such an amazing game, I knew that I had to make a video of it. And even better, my subscriber credits me with an idea of bishop capturing a pawn on f7. So let's have a quick look at that game first. Let's have a look first at the review. And my subscriber played a massively impressive game, 93.1% accuracy. And even look at this. Apart from the one single mistake, which we'll see in context, and book moves, they were all either best moves, great moves, or brilliancies. Absolutely amazing. And if we go down to the move list, you can see where my subscriber basically went Super Saiyan. Move 8, brilliant, brilliant, great move, extraordinary. Let's now go on to the analysis. All right, so my subscriber is Yosoid Food, sort of rated just in the sort of low 1000s against another opponent in the 1000s, and my subscriber played the Vienna Gambit Accepted. E4, E5, knight C3, knight F6, and immediate F4, the Vienna Gambit Accepted, and when it's accepted, always E5, that knight needs to go back, and the opponent, so recognize that, and you have to bring the knight out to prevent the queen coming to h4 with check. They now develop knight c6, d4, all very standard. And now the opponent plays a rather dubious move with g5, and Stockfish called this a straight up error. Mistake, +3. And basically every time a pawn moves forward, it cannot go back. And every time a pawn moves forward, it weakens the defense behind it. And we'll need to keep an eye on this light square diagonal to the king. My subscriber plays bishop to c4, and this is the move that Stockfish called a mistake. However, you will see that this ends up being a critical part of the win. So I'm not so sure that was really a mistake. Pawn goes forward again, and here comes the first brilliant move. Bishop captures pawn on f4, basically sacking the knight. And that's a mistake. You can see getting towards +6.5, +7. And basically here, white is clearing the king's side of defenders. Here comes the second sack. Bishop captures pawn on f7, with check. King now captures. King move forward, now stuck on this side of the board. Queen takes that final pawn. And basically, the king is now in real trouble. It's going to be attacked by these two pieces. You've got the pawn here as well. It's in some real trouble. King moves back, and you can see Stockfish thought the knight had to come out basically to prevent this move, but they didn't make the move. Queen h5 with check. King falls forward. Bishop g5 with check. The knight can block. Bishop takes. Here, the opponent resigned because, they knew that, mate in one was coming. But what was the mate? The king here has only one move. Queen protects these squares. That square is protected by the pawn. So king must move forward to e6, and then my subscriber would have had d5 d5 pawn checkmate. Checkmate with pawn. What a brilliant, amazing game with a double brilliancy. Let's move on now to the game that I played with my subscriber. Now, as you can see in this game, I played okay. This was a Vienna game main line, but very exciting. I was winning, I was losing, I was winning, I was losing. luckily, I eventually captured the win. Luckily for me, I wasn't humiliated by my subscriber in the way that their opponent was in their next game. Let's move on now to the analysis. So obviously my subscriber has found a love for the Vienna Gambit, and who wouldn't? So I oblige. So e4, e5, knight c3, knight f6, f4, Vienna Gambit. Now, of course, I wasn't going to play a bad move against the Vienna Gambit, so d5, the only good response to the Falkbeer Vienna Gambit, entering the Vienna game main line. Here, there is pretty much only one good move for white, which is to immediately take an attack. And so when I saw that my opponent, my subscriber, played knight f3, I thought, maybe they're not too familiar with the Vienna game mainline, and that gives an advantage to me. So they take back, and I thought, oh, okay, are we going to exchange knights here? Well, I'll take first, there's no harm with that. And then I saw they took back with the queen. And I was reasonably sure that this was not a good move. And when we look at sort of stockfish evaluation afterwards, yeah, it wasn't. It's sort of almost -4. However, at this point, I think I got maybe a little bit careless, maybe a little bit arrogant. And I thought, yeah, let's immediately attack the queen. Immediately attack the queen. That was obviously a mistake in the opening. As you can see, it's a blunder, basically +3. And the reason it's a blunder is that the queen is under no obligation to be taken by the bishop, and has a nice attack and capture of the g7 pawn, causing all sorts of threats on my queen side. And a reasonably obvious move, and that's what they did. As soon as they made that move, I thought, oh, okay, that was a rather silly thing to be doing. I didn't think it was game ending. I thought, I should just play on. Now, obviously here, I need to protect that rook. So I have to move the knight out of the way so the queen provides protection, which is what I do. Now that gives my opponent the opportunity to take back the knight, and I capture the pawn back. And sort of towards the end of the opening, basically I am a pawn down. I'm a pawn down, maybe slightly more development. Their queen may be in slightly the wrong place, but the advantage clearly is with my opponent. They develop their bishop. Here I thought, look, if I move my bishop out of the way, that's just going to be ceding a developmental advantage to my opponent. They basically effectively gain a move. So I thought what I'm going to do here is to take. They're going to have to take back with a backwards knight move. So again, I'm not so disadvantaged necessarily on development here. I now develop another piece, my bishop. They sort of move the king with a check, but that's not a big problem. Maybe they were baiting a trade here, but of course that would be a serious mistake. So block with the knight. They short castles, sorry, and I short castles, moving my king out of that attack and also unpinning the knight. Here, I didn't necessarily think, again, that I was in a big problem. So we look at the feedback, yeah, no, it's +1. It's about the value of that single piece. But when you look at sort of possibilities, I thought they're going to probably have to move their queen at some point. So there's a queen move that may not necessarily be contributing to an attack, but I've got the bishop, I've got the queen, this knight is freely to move forward as well, and so I was eyeing this h2 pawn as a potential target and a potential, even a mating threat. So I thought I had a plan. The opponent, my subscriber, played b3, so I suspect maybe trying to fianchetto their bishop. I move the knight forward. They bring back their queen. I move the knight forward again. And here, my opponent actually makes a blunder. Why is this a blunder? Well, there are a few reasons for that. Firstly, I didn't actually see this, but I actually had a very, very nice skewer of the queen and rook because the e5 square is defended by the knight. So I think that's a lot of the reason why it's almost -6.5, -7. The other thing is that it doesn't entirely address the attack on the king. So that knight is not entirely well placed in that position. I play queen to h4, and Stockfish calls it a missed win. Now here I was again thinking, this is clearly a mate in one threat. And it's not entirely clear what my opponent can do about that, what my subscriber can do about that. However, the reason why it's 0-0-0 equality is like, why is it equality? It's only equality if my subscriber finds this one pretty savage series of moves, which is queen captures pawn on g7, king captures back, and now a royal fork, and they get to recapture my queen. So that would have been absolutely brilliant if it was seen. Now, my subscriber didn't see that. I didn't see that either until I did the analysis. Instead, they push h3, which is a mistake. So he's still -6 because I now have bishop captures knight. And that knight is straight up lost. They cannot capture back with pawn. Effectively, that pawn is pinned. And it's pinned because if it captures, then this again would be mate with that square covered by the bishop. So I thought I was doing really, really well here, to be honest. Now my opponent now makes a very, very good move, threatening mate in one. Any sort of threats of mate in one are very, very forcing. And here I actually thought quite hard about what to do. I wasn't actually sure how I could prevent a serious problem without losing my attack. Stockfish, however, does find a solution. What Stockfish suggests is bishop to h2, which forces the king to only one square, to h1, and then bishop to e5, of course defended by the knight, with an attack on the queen. So that was the best move. Instead, and actually the reason why we want the king in that position is that that pawn is now pinned so that it cannot allow a capture back if the bishop moves off that diagonal. I didn't see that. Instead, what I did was bishop to f2, and that simply doesn't quite work so well. So the king is forced to move, and I thought, okay, that seems to be all right. That looks like it's pinned. And so I thought what I would do here would be to play f6, which now prevents the mate in one. This knight is still guarded. It can't be taken by the pawn, but it's a blunder. As you can see, I'm losing again. And the reason why it's a blunder, and my subscriber found this move, it is queen to c4 with check and an attack on that knight. And the queen can now capture that knight, effectively forcing a trade in queens. So that's what I missed. King has to move out of the way. And yep, basically a trade. And here the logic on why I made this particular series of moves is that I thought that the best way to not potentially lose my bishop as well is captures and then captures. There we go. So now we enter sort of the late part of the middle game. Same colored bishops, both have both rooks. I'm slightly behind because I am down a pawn. Now, the very interesting thing here is I think my subscriber and I had different perspectives on the strategy in this part of the game. My goal was to keep my my pieces on light squares, because once they're on light squares, they're immune to the dark square bishop. I was going to try, because I was already got this file, try to infiltrate my opponent's second rank, and then that's often very, very powerful. For my subscriber, they ended up trying to push their pawns, which is of course a perfectly good strategy in the middle game, but I think in this case it ended up being a little bit slow. So let's see what happened. So they play bishop to a3. Obviously, I've got to move that rook out of the way. They start pushing their pawns. However, rook to e2. Let's have a look at the evaluation here. So that was good. So first rook on the second rank. They now have to react, given that that pawn was under attack. I bring rook ge8, lining up again, trying to get it to the second rank. They push the pawn. That's fine. I now move my rook to rook c2. So again, on the light square, allowing this rook to go onto a light square on the second rank. Now, I think my subscriber thought that maybe I was going to put a rook onto that square to target that pawn, but that wasn't what I was trying to do. So they effectively lost a turn. Both rooks now on the second rank, and a blunder. And here I get to take that pawn. They bring the bishop all the way back. I think they were worried about a potential sort of checkmate there, and I thought that I would be able to outmaneuver my opponent. And here we go, I did. That was a mistake, a straight up blunder, because I can now capture that bishop without any compensation. So there we go. And we enter the endgame, rook and bishop versus one rook, basically completely winning for me. They try to take the open file, obviously need to block, need to be beware of back rank mate. They push a pawn, create a loft, so I can never be back rank mated now. Push again, that doesn't achieve anything. And here we go, that pawn is lost. There we are. And there's a bit of shuffling now, seeing whether I got a mate, but offered to trade rooks, rook down, see, but I've got a loft, no problems. They want to take my last pawn, that's fine. Captures. And of course now that rook must stay on guard duty for their A pawn, and their A pawn realistically is their last hope. Without the A pawn, they cannot win. I have 4 passed pawns. Basically, it means that rook is stuck on that file. Their king is, cut off from from assistance. I've basically won. So they move the king, but I push a pawn. My subscriber sees the writing on the wall, graciously resigns. Good game, GG. The big takeaway from this video is that the Vienna Gambit is a super fun system to play. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.